Hello. Do you want to learn more about the Japanese language? Then you've come to the right place. Today, Japanese is spoken by about 130 million people, around that number, both native and non-native, but mostly native. Japanese is a very mysterious language due to the uniquely isolated character of Japan and its geography. So scholars have tried to link the Japanese language and its origins to many different languages and language families, such as the Ryukyuan Island languages, such as Amami Oshima and Okinawan. Those are both considered by some people to be dialects of Japanese, but they're different enough to be considered their own languages as well. And those are islands near the main Japanese islands. Korean and Chinese are, in my opinion, they seem more intuitively connected to Japanese, although you can't be completely sure because of how uniquely isolated, again, Japan is. Scholars have have attempted to connect Japanese with Tibeto-Burman. That's the mountainous regions of southeastern Asia. There's a family of languages in that area. Different language families as well, such as Altaic and Euro-Altaic, as well as even Indo-Germanic. I believe that the source from which I got this term from, that they meant somewhere in between India and Central Europe. So as you can see, Japanese is a very mysterious language as far as its origins. Japanese also, however, it relies on fixed words and forms that typically come at the end of sentences, which makes it easy for younger people to identify when a sentence ends and where the period goes. For instance, the suffix ta, which I have in red here, the suffix ta ends past tense verbs. So the past tense polite form of verbs, you'll often find the word mashita at the end. It indicates that it's past tense form of a verb and also a polite way of saying the verb. So in my study of the Japanese language and the different things that come up in its usage, the sociolinguistics of Japanese, terms like ambiguity, incompleteness, politeness, gender binary, and hierarchy a lot of words of this nature came up. There are many cultural norms distinguishing gender differences in Japan, trying to make different genders fit into heteronormative categories. So there are things that are stereotypically feminine, stereotypically masculine. There is a hierarchy in terms of politeness. You're supposed to use certain word forms around certain people, and you're allowed to use more casual forms only around, people maybe your age or people of the same sex or gender as you. And also there's an expectation put on women to omit certain words, and this makes for very ambiguous or incomplete sentences sometimes. So since this presentation pertains to the sociolinguistics of Japanese, which sociolinguistics is how social factors affect language, that also is going to have to do with pragmatics, which is the study of how context contributes to meaning. Okay, so as our first example of how gender affects language in Japanese and language use, I have an example here which relies on the Japanese word da, which is pretty much the same as English's main copula to be. So da can come in many versions. It can be present tense, is, it can be past tense, was, it can be used to, am, were, etc. So da has many versions, and in Dansaigo, this word is often present, such as in the sentence Hanto Dayo, and in Josaigo, da is often omitted, leaving that kind of ambiguity or incompleteness that I mentioned earlier. However, with this example, the ambiguity is only on the surface. It's only a superficial ambiguity because Hanto Yo is still perfectly intelligible in Joe Saigo, there are just certain things that are omitted, and it's kind of understood that certain things won't be said because they're too straightforward. And again, there's that expectation placed on women to be not too straightforward, not too direct or sharp with their use of language. So honto dayo, it simply means it's true. So we have honto meaning true, da meaning it is or is, and yo is simply an emphasizer word. It's saying this really is the case. This is really true. I swear it's true. And honto yo here is just true with emphasis. So the form of da in this sentence, since this is saying it is true, since this translates to it's true, the usage of da in this sentence must be third person singular present, because what we have here is, or a kind of a way of saying it is true. We would have to say it is true in English. So, as opposed to my last example, which relied on very broad generalizations of Don-Saigo, men's language, and Jo-Saigo, women's language, recent scholarship of the Japanese language, recent Japanese language scholarship, I should say, has been focused on a more skeptical examination of what is called within gender diversity of language use. So the same gender using many different forms, many forms of sentence ending forms, different words that aren't stereotypically considered appropriate for that for that gender to use. So as an example of this, teo and dawa, these two phrases I have here, which are sentence final forms in Japanese, were once banned from grammar books during the Meiji period. Teo is a phrase expressing a firm request, and we have dawa here, which is a phrase which is sort of a personal opinion version of saying this is the case, because we have da here again, which is. Wa is, instead of, you can't say, typically women don't say da yo, they say da wa, because it's a softer version of that emphasis. These were once banned from traditional grammar books during the Meiji period, and then they were repopularized actually through novels and fiction. So although people might want to make it seem as if certain genders just inherently want to gravitate towards certain sentence final forms, certain words, certain sentence particles, that's not actually the case. It comes through cultural conditioning. However, on the other hand, wa, as we see here, which is now again accepted for female usage, is made fun of by many women in private for being sort of over the top in its stereotypical femininity. We have words like wa kashida, which means I wonder. It's a way of saying kashida is a sentence final form again, which it's just it's the feminine way of expressing I wonder if this is the case. I wonder if this could be true. So these words have recently been understood to be made fun of by certain women for being just a little bit too stereotypically feminine. So while younger women and just women in general in Japan are sort of breaking out, certain women are breaking out of the stereotypical Jo-Saigo words, there's still a lot of criticism from women using Don-Saigo words, especially more casual Don-Saigo words like sugi. Sugi is a collapsed version of sugoi, which means they both mean awesome. So sugi is the collapsed version of awesome. And then we have shiroyo, which means do it. That's another a casual phrase which men are allowed to use. You can't use these words in formal settings, but even for a man. But when women have used them recently, there was one blog post I looked into as a part of a research article that criticized a woman who was using these words, saying that they even associated her lack of linguistic femininity with her class status. So there's even a sort of an association or a conflation in Japanese culture that makes it seem as if the higher status the women and the higher the class of the person, the more formal, the more polite they'll be, especially if it's a woman speaking. So as you can see, language has a lot of there's a lot of mental associations in people's minds when it comes to language and how it's used in Japanese culture. So just in conclusion, I think that one area in which studies on the Japanese language and the sociolinguistics and pragmatics of the Japanese language, one area in which it could be improved is that there might be more detail in the participant responses. I think this would be helpful because it would really get at people's motivations and feelings about why they're saying the things they say, why they make exact word choices in specific contexts and not in others. Exactly when, where, and why they make certain word choices and why they wouldn't make the same word choice in a different location in front of a different person, etc. Because I think this really underlines, it really has to do with I think there's a perception that the way Japanese language might be used, it could be seen as dishonest in certain situations. Although if we're going to make an either or binary of honesty versus dishonesty, we have to really understand people's motivations and how they might clash with cultural norms. I'm not saying that Japanese speakers might, I'm not saying they wouldn't use their language in a dishonest way. I could think of, for instance, someone using a first person pronoun that's more formal just because they want to seem professional when really they're doing sneaky things behind the scenes. I'm not saying that the Japanese language can't be used in a dishonest way, but if we just get more details in participant answers, we can really examine why people are doing what they're doing, if their motivations clash with social norms, and if that is an example of what we might consider dishonesty as opposed to honesty. Another possibility is that the more detail we get from participants, it might inform us as to how we could provide more options when it comes to Japanese word choice, such as different pronouns that are gender neutral, more pronouns just within the same gender, like more options for male pronouns rather than just boku versus ore, or more options for female pronouns that don't seem stereotypically feminine, or different options for sentence final forms that aren't don't have a kind of stereotypical femininity that even women don't want to use. So these are just some potential future directions for research in this area.